our approach to how we design stages, kind of some of the starting points that we take and how we approach adding lighting, LED, and thinking about things like the stage plot that like Chris talked about and things like that. We incorporate all that into our stage designs. Let's talk about our starting points. What's the event? So usually the event or the venue or what we're designing for really dictates what we're doing. So this could be an Easter service, Christmas service. This could be a 3-day conference, a concert film, tour. Any type of event like that is going to greatly change what we're doing. Even if we're going to be installing a set like we did here at Trinity, the original set that we did, it was a church install and it stayed up for almost a year. Yeah, it stayed up for a year. And so if we're going into a venue and we know that set's going to stay up for that long, we kind of think through it a little bit differently, trying to give as many options as possible, because that set can get a little boring after a year. So what's the event? What's the theme or vision? So usually if we're designing for a conference, especially a conference or a concert, that they come with a vision or a theme that they're going after. So for conferences, and we have a few that we picked out, they have that vision that they're going for. So it could be like a prophetic conference, or it could be an open heavens conference, or heaven come, something like that. And that usually comes with a theme. So we try to incorporate parts of the LED or the graphics that we create for the LED, things like that. For example, the very first Heaven Come, this is a great example. We built a cross essentially out of LED tiles. We used blow-through LED and we had lights behind them, which we talked about over there. But then also the graphic that was used, the Heaven Come graphic, it had two of the letters were triangles, and basically one was pointing up and one was pointing down, and it still spelled out a heaven. But it also, those triangles were, pointing towards heaven and pointing towards grounds, and it's a Heaven Come conference. So it's like incorporating part of the design into the theme of the conference. Budget. This is a big one. Finding budget. What's the budget? The budget greatly affects what you can do with lighting, LED, anything like that. Even at Bethel, I think a lot of people think that Bethel has like all this money and they can do whatever they want. A lot of the sets that we did at Bethel were back in the early days. We did a ton of sets with American DJ par 38s, which are literally pars that you plug into dimmers, and those are $30 pars on Sweetwater. They still make them, and they just take a normal 150-watt floodlight bulb. Very cheap fixture. We just ended up, because they're $30, we ended up buying like 100 of them to blanket the back wall of the stage. And when you turn them all on and you have that many of them, it creates a very impactful blinder look with a very cheap, affordable fixture. And so even if you don't have a lot of money, there's still options that you can create really cool looking sets without a ton of budget. Obviously, the more budget that you get, the more things that you can do with LED and lighting and things like that. And lastly, finding inspiration. I think Andrew and we're constantly looking at other sets. We're constantly looking at other people's work. We follow a lot of people on Instagram. We watch a lot of concert films. And if you looked through our Instagram messages to each other, it's usually either trucks or sets that we watch. And so we're constantly sending each other ideas. And then usually these questions up here, when we go into talking to leadership about a set design or something like that, once we get that vision or that theme, plus the budget, we're going back to, that one image, we could do something like that. And it's never copying someone else's thing. We might incorporate a certain element that we love from that set design, and then we'll pull it into what we're doing and design around it. Usually we kind of find a starting point element. So it could be, for example, that Heaven Come that had the cross. That was the main starting point for that design. It was like, okay, we want to put a cross of LED on the stage. And then everything else was designed around that one element. If you're going into a concert specifically or a tour, a lot of times what we found is we're actually working with a client that we're doing a concert film next month. And we kind of made a rough design and we rendered it and we sent it to them. But we didn't hear the songs, we didn't hear the music. And the design was actually really, really cool. Then when we got the songs back, the demos back, we actually changed the design because our design didn't fit what the music was actually doing. So a lot of times the music, especially if you're doing an event or a concert, tours, things like that, the music greatly affects how you're going to design. Slower music, not a lot of energy. You're not going to want a lot of moving lights and things like that that just don't fit the energy of the music. So knowing the songs helps a lot.
So this is another big thing that you have to consider, and that is like your building and room details. So there's obviously a big difference between a room like the sanctuary over there and a room like this. So it's going to greatly change what your design is going to be. So, I mean, the biggest thing is your stage size. How big is your stage? And what you can do on that stage. Like here, it's floating on a wood frame, so you can't put a lot of weight on here. But what's nice is there's a lot of rigging options above. The things you have to think about is the weight limits, and that's where you have to get into structural and have to figure out what those weight limits are and what they sign off on. Physical points, what can you hang from up there? And usually it's metal beams like web truss or steel I-beams. But then another thing is trim height too. It's nice in here that there's not like a proscenium hanging down that would block a lot of what you could do in the lid, get a lot more height and depth out of your set design basically. There's width too. Some stages are really closed in and boxed in with walls, and that can kind of limit what you can do. A wide open stage like this is really nice. You have way less limitations. So getting into the room and figuring out what that is, also getting a CAD file is really helpful, because then you don't have to go through that room initially to start building your set design. It's hard to just go off a picture, so if you can get a CAD file and bring it into like a program I use primarily is Vectorworks and start building in there, it speeds up that process and allows just that creative flow. If I get a file that's like really boxed and set, I'll start thinking about probably more floor packages stuff. But if it's like a stage that's like over there, I'm like, okay, I can actually fly things and make the set really wide. I could probably put both LED and lighting because it's so big. But in a room like this, it's like, okay, I might have to downsize and not do as much LED or any at all. So those are some practical things.
A lot of like theaters and venues and things like that rent out their space for concerts or events, they will have those CAD files and those weight calculations, all that stuff. They have all that already that you can ask for and you can get. If you are in a church and you're looking to have someone come design, I would highly recommend paying someone to make that CAD file if you don't already have it. When they ask us to come to a church and design something, it's probably 50-50 if they actually have a CAD file for us to go off of. So they're either paying us to come out and measure their room and make them a CAD file, or if there's someone at the church that can do that, highly recommend getting that done, as well as finding out what your structure can hold. A structural engineer can come out and tell you what your weight limits are. Sometimes in like a facility like over there, and this basically, we instantly came back with, we want to hang 10,000 pounds, and they said, no problem. In some venues, we want to hang 1,000 pounds, and they say, each point can only hold 100 pounds. So every venue is different with how they're made. Oh yeah, Microsoft, how much weight can Microsoft hold? 80,000 pounds in the lid. Microsoft is a huge venue down in LA. That's where we did Heaven Come. It's designed to do events and big shows like that, which is why they can hang so much weight in the lid. So if you're also creating a new venue, that's something to think about, is not just having a roof structure that can hold what you want to put in there initially, but anything that you can think of for the future, you want to plan for a weight capacity of that. Christian or secular can kind of determine, that's going to change the event, the content, the lighting, a lot different. The music style, the branding style. A conference we could design, it might have a lot of keynotes. It might have a lot of video playbacks versus a concert might have none of that. And so we might put a ton more lighting in for like a concert on the stage, but like a conference, we might put a ton more key light in because we have like a ton of speakers, or we want a much bigger IMAX screen because they have a lot of keynotes or videos to play back. So the type of event, again, determines kind of what we do. Oh, and for film or in person or both. So I did a conference actually in 2017, a My City conference in Sacramento, and it wasn't really for broadcast. It was only for a youth conference in person. And so half the event, I went back and looked at the photos recently, half the event I didn't use key light. I just used the stage wash as colored key, and it looked great in the room. On the video that they did have, it wasn't really going anywhere. It doesn't look amazing because there was no front light or key light. And so it didn't matter because there was no broadcast. So in the room, it was awesome. But those are things to think about. If it's going to be like live streamed, or if it's for film, if the event is for a video recording or something like that, you wouldn't necessarily not want to have no key light, because that could look rather bad. So that's just something to think about. Again, the types of events that you're doing.